Okay, so this semester we're going to be using MySQL, whatever you want to call it. And so we need to download that first. Go to the browser of your choice. It's important to note that there's a free version and there is a pay version, and the price difference between the free version and the pay version is very substantial. Just keep in mind that we want to use the free version. Now, even though we're likely using a 64-bit computer, this is likely going to be using the 32-bit program. It's not a big deal. It has an installer. There is a short installer, and what it does is it pulls up the like a short installer sorry, a short installer, which then downloads all of the other installer activity, and then there is one that's larger. It really doesn't matter which one that you get, they will do the same thing in the end. It'll ask you to log in or sign up. You don't need to do either one. Just go down below. It says no thanks, just start my download. Save it to your desktop. It'll be easier to find there. Now, at this point, you can close out the browser, but I'm just going to leave it open here. Okay, so you download the installer. Now, this is a little tricky because of the fact that the firewall can block some modifications needed for services. So go to here, click on settings, oops, I hit the wrong one. I always forget security is here. To me, security should be in settings, but alright, whatever. And what we need to do is open up Windows Security. We have virus and threat, that's fine, but the firewall blocks some of the administrative aspects of this. Now, if you have a different firewall, maybe you will, maybe you won't. It's hard to say. I don't even remember which one of these. I had this installed forever, so when we switched to this, Microsoft Defender Firewall, all of my access goes through something else of a firewall, and it doesn't affect this because it's not on this machine. So guess I should have just left that open. So now we start this. Click yes, changes. I just choose full, although strictly speaking I only really need the server. But this I think has the workbench in it. Yep, has the workbench in it. And the workbench is just a nicer environment to work in. Okay, so then right from here, like I said, I had this installed before, so I'm just going to select yes. These are the one page of the things that are going to be installed. Execute. Now, if it weren't for the database that we're going to be using, you could do this basically with any database. If you were using Windows 10, you could install Microsoft SQL Server. However, under Windows 11, there's issues. Leave it to Microsoft to cause problems with their own products. It's not so much that you need a special SQL interpreter for SQL itself. SQL itself is reasonably the same across all platforms. And when I say all platforms, it's basically the same for Windows, for Mac, for Linux. In fact, in the case of MySQL, you actually can download versions of this for various different platforms and do the same SQL commands. What is a problem in some respects is that the database that we use for the course is a fairly large database, and mostly you can't find, or I haven't found say for instance an online thing where you could what do we have here? Use strong password, use legacy. Root password. I'm just gonna it's telling it it's weak. I don't really care to go through a complicated password for something I'm just going to use for the class. Let's see. Add user. It's going to have root, and I'm just going to use root. I could add another user, myself, for instance, but root will do. This is the service is needed for starting up the system. run Windows service as a standard system account. This is the recommended setting, so obviously take that. Yes, grant full access to the user running the Windows service. In general cases, most people using Windows are already running that way. They're running as admin. There's only one level above admin, so yeah. Next, apply configuration, execute. This doesn't take as much time because you're not really installing anything here. You're just setting all the settings that you just ran through. Click Finish. Click Next. Bootstrapping, you don't have to bootstrap because, again, this is for this machine. Finish. Next. Now you have to type in the password that you typed in. Click check, and then you should see this connection succeeded. If you don't, then something seriously has gone wrong in the connection. If you have gone in and you had a version of this installed before, and then you took it out via the Windows Programs installer, that's going to be a problem. If you didn't do the installation with the firewall turned off, that may be the problem. Click Next. Checking if there are any features installed that need configuration, running scripts. Basically, it's going through its initial setup thing. Once it has done that, the process is never going to really require you to do that. Oops. No. Click Next. Now there's a thing here. Installation procedure has been completed. Copy log to clipboard. Start MySQL shell after startup. Click Finish. Okay, so this is the database itself, but then this pops up over top. This is the workbench, which is probably obvious by the "Welcome to MySQL Workbench." And at that point, you are basically ready to go. One thing here is that you may see a thing here on mine that you don't see on yours, and that's because this was a different database project that I had worked on a while back, and it went under the name Marenia. Okay, so I could delete it, but whatever. Okay, so that's the installation. If you have problems, then we'll have to address those before we can go on to the next step. Okay, student, so I've logged back into the workbench, and the way we create the Chinook database is relatively simple. But before we get into that, I want to mention that if you have not turned your firewall back on, you should do that. At this point, we no longer need the firewall down. And we do that by going to Security, go to Firewall, just turn it back on. Okay, and it'll show that it's a green arrow, a green check mark, and we're done. That's it. Okay, so I'm back in the workbench.